President Trump was in China a few weeks ago, and President Xi really didn't offer much. And why would he? The U.S. is sapping its own power in another unwinnable war in the Middle East, which is very beneficial to China. It has used munitions that it would use in protection of Taiwan if China decides to militarily take over Taiwan. It has reduced its credibility with allies in the Middle East. So every mistake that the U.S. has committed in the Middle East is in China's interest. And also, finally, Iran is the only place in the Middle East in which the U.S. does not have a foothold. So why would China do anything to change those circumstances?
One of the factors that's contributing to this economic situation, I suppose, and the atmosphere around what Burnham will be able to do in the budget is, of course, the conflict in Iran. President Trump has told us repeatedly that he's won that particular war, and yet there is no peace deal, and Iran's regime continues to defy his will. Now the US is trying to hurt the Iranian economy. The American Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent declared an economic D-Day, as he called it, for Iran, as he revealed a wave of sanctions on the country.
Beginning today, the actions of Treasury and other agencies will tighten the noose and block every potential source of revenue that funds the IRGC and the evil Iranian regime. We are enforcing a zero leakage approach. There will be no minimal breathing space for the regime to rebuild its capacity to inflict terror against America and the world.
Well, Bessent compared Iran to the communist Eastern European regimes that finally collapsed when their economies failed. So can that happen? Ali Vaez is Deputy Director of the Middle East and North Africa Programme at the International Crisis Group. Ali, good morning.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
It's good to speak to you. What exactly has changed here? What is different this time around from previous rounds of sanctions?
Well, to be honest, it's unclear. The language was pretty belligerent, but it really was empty of any details. It was very vague in terms of what the U.S. wants to do. I mean, remember, Iran is already one of the most sanctioned countries in the world. Almost anything that moves in Iran has already been sanctioned by the U.S. Multiple times by different authorities. And so the only thing that might make a difference now is enforcement, tighter enforcement. But that has to start really with the biggest target, which is Iran's number one trading partner, China.
And what does that? How significant is that? I suppose this potential for China to be roped in here, and the impact that could have.
Well, look, you were just talking about economic problems at the global level. Imagine if we are back in a phase that the first and the second biggest economies in the world are at each other's throats again in an economic warfare. I mean, last year we had this experience, and President Trump backed out of it because of the inflationary impact that it generated in the United States. Right now, if the U.S. is to go back into economic war with China at a time that gas prices in the U.S. in the run-up to the midterm elections are already double the price of what they were last year, I think it would really generate a backlash against President Trump. So I'm skeptical. And then the other option for the Trump administration is to go after Iran's neighbors, land neighbors, Turkey, Iraq, Pakistan. And some of these countries have really good relations with the Trump administration. And I'm sure they don't want to alienate the United States, but they can't also afford to alienate their neighbor with whom they have and will continue to live for another few centuries.
Isn't the reality here also, Ali, that the US can say what it likes and to some extent can perhaps follow through, but Iran is fully aware of its power in controlling the Strait of Hormuz, which has been at the heart of this whole thing now for months?
Right. This is a game of endurance now. And basically, there are two clocks ticking. One is the economic pressure on Iran, and the Trump administration is hoping that it would bring Iranian economy to the verge of collapse very quickly. And the other is the economic pressure that the Iranians are externalizing to the rest of the world and the U.S. economy by closing the strait. And the Iranian view is that Trump is going to blink first. But the problem here is that in either of the scenarios of whether this economic D-Day policy works or doesn't work, we would probably end up in a bad place. If it works, Iranians would probably escalate militarily to try to break this embargo around them. And if it doesn't work, then Trump is left again to resort back to military options to try to score some sort of a win that would then allow him to walk away from this conflict.
Yeah. So we're in a bit of a doom loop. I know you've described this as a forever war in the making in the past.
It is, because at the end of the day, the one thing that is required is totally absent in the current dynamics, which is taking diplomacy seriously and also delivering on commitments that are made diplomatically. And this is another blind spot, I think, for the Trump administration, is that, yes, of course, sanctions at the end of the day will have an impact on the Iranian economy. The dial is already 9 out of 10, it will be 9.5 out of 10. But that half a degree is not going to be a game changer, number one. Number two, pressure is only as effective as the prospect of relieving them in return for policy changes. And the Iranians no longer believe that Trump is a reliable negotiating partner and would ever relieve the pressure of sanctions. They believe that if they compromise, it would signal weakness, Trump would move the goalposts and would only increase the pressure.
Yeah. So President Xi of China is scheduled to arrive in Washington next month, which would be his first state visit in more than a decade. Is there a world in which, Ali, Trump manages to get Xi on side to cooperate actually with what he is trying to do to Iran? I'm not sure what that would look like, but is it possible?
Well, he has already tried once when President Trump was in China a few weeks ago. And President Xi really didn't offer much. And why would he? The U.S. is sapping its own power in another unwinnable war in the Middle East, which is very beneficial to China. It has used munitions that it would use in protection of Taiwan if China decides to militarily take over Taiwan. It has reduced its credibility with allies in the Middle East. So every mistake that the U.S. has committed in the Middle East is in China's interest. And also, finally, Iran is the only place in the Middle East in which the U.S. does not have a foothold. So why would China do anything to change those circumstances?
Ali, it's really good to speak to you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Ali Vaez is Deputy Director of the Middle East and North Africa Programme at International Crisis Group. And the other part of this is that there's nothing new actually in trying to make Iran, try to sideline Iran economically. I was looking back at and the analysis is the first serious efforts to impose sanctions on Iran date back to the George W. Bush administration. The Obama administration was trying to push Iran into negotiations in 2009, and Hillary Clinton promised crippling sanctions at that point. And all of that took years to have any real outcome. So even if you go for it now with this level of sanctions, when will you actually get a result?